Hello and welcome to episode number 3 for Leadership Wisdom. I'm Joanne Corley-Swarzkopf. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most challenging aspects of leadership, and that is burnout. So you know what time it is? It's time to get your notebook, pads, papers, whatever you use to take notes, and let's talk about what that really means. And I'll give you some coaching tips on how to mitigate it. All right, let's get started. All right, so the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because in the news as of late was the announcement that the acclaimed Prime Minister of New Zealand, her name is Jacinda Ardern, is resigning. And one of the reasons stated in the press was she just did not have the energy to run for re-election. And I really resonated with the thought of energy in leadership, particularly during COVID and a lot of things that have happened post-COVID. I mean, are we really over it? Is the concept and the experience of burnout. What does that actually look like? Well, it's happening a lot and more common than we think. So that's the reason why I wanted to make this video and to offer some coaching tips, because I don't want you to be one of those leaders that really is, in the words of Jackson Brown, running on empty. So our leadership wisdom for the day is you cannot give out of an empty wagon. And that quote comes from one of the famous motivational speakers, Les Brown. So I want to give you some coaching tips on how to successfully manage burnout. Okay, the first is we have to actually understand and have the self-awareness that we're even struggling with it in the first place before we get to burnout. So I call that the yellow flag before the red flags occurs. And self-awareness is based in, I know myself well enough to know when I'm starting to get the yellow flags. That means the symptoms, the feelings, both either physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, that I'm not feeling that great or that my tank is getting low. So your self-awareness is really the key, the bottom line key to success in managing burnout. So you've got to be aware of where you're at, because it's a continuum. It's like all of a sudden you're great and the next day you're burnt out. It doesn't work that way. Usually it's a little bit done over a period of time, and then you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't pay attention to the symptoms, and now here I am. Because if you don't pay attention to the symptoms, it's going to take a lot longer for a recovery period. Okay, coaching tip number 2. You've got to be able to know yourself well enough to know what gives you recovery. Okay, so the tip would be not only know yourself well enough, but then tip 3, which I'm adding in here, is to have a recovery plan. That means specific things you know you can do that are your go-to things or activities or whatever that's going to give you the refreshment that you need, whether it's refreshment, restoration, a lot of reason, I can go into a lot of re's on this, alrighty? But you got to be able to know what works for you. And see, here's the key. What works for one person and their circumstances may not work for another person. So you have to know yourself well enough and then have a plan in place to actually exercise or take advantage of or implement in your schedule these go-to mechanisms. So for me, I know that for me, I've got to detach. And I have a fixed time in my schedule where I can do some meditation, listen to some music. So there's actually a shift in my brain so that I can literally tear myself away from the things that I'm doing, because I work on things very intensely. Part of my plan too is also watch movies, particularly period movies, because period movies, I feel like I'm taken to someplace really different. I call them like cheap vacations because they really shift my brain. And I could be in, for lack of a better term, an altered state. And then I also have some things like a massage, going out to dinner with friends. There's a list of things that I do that are my go-to, guaranteed to fill me back up again. By the way, another thing on my list I'll share is have a 100% unscheduled day. I know that's not realistic for everybody, but for me, luckily, I'm able to do that. So I know that retreating, taking time, and people have all sorts of things like checking themselves into a hotel for 24 hours, or, I mean, there's just a lot of different things. You have to know what works for you. And then the final tip is you have to honor it. When you start to feel those things, you have to pay attention, respect the messages that your body, your mind, and spirit is giving you, and then actually take action on it. If you do those consistently, that will mitigate burnout. Now, every quarter, I take a very significant vacation, and it's not significant, meaning it's not 2 weeks. It's usually 4 or 5 days. That's about my time frame where I can really decompress, really get to zero, and be really genuinely refreshed to come back in to work. So I know that works for me. For someone else, it's going to be different. But my point is that you have to know it, plan it, and act on it before you get to the red flag, which is some serious symptoms and issues related to burnout. Yes, I have experienced burnout, and that's another reason why I'm giving you this video. Also, too, because I don't want anybody to go through it. It's awful. I got to the point where I was very disconnected from my purpose and my mission, and I wanted to quit. And that's another thing we'll talk about here in subsequent videos. It's a great video from Leslie Jones where she was on The View, and she talked about how she just wanted to quit. When you get to a point of burnout, you can almost disconnect from your life. It can lead to more serious things like depression and drinking and, a lot of things like that. But for right now, I just want to talk about the yellow flags. That means the simple symptoms and creating the practice, rhythm, and habits of taking care of yourself on a regular basis so it doesn't get to burnout. Respect yourself. Refresh yourself. And the final action, bonus coaching tip, plug it into your calendar. If you don't put it on your calendar, it can easily be ignored. And another bonus tip related to that is partner with the people in your life who love you to help you support the things that you need to avoid burnout. Okay, there you have it. That's leadership wisdom number 3. You cannot give out of an empty wagon. And because of that, we have to keep our wagon filled up on a regular basis. And please take it seriously to have the mechanisms in place to do just that. Okay, we'll see you next time.